Welcome to the Mobile Hunters Dojo, a community helping hunters reach their full potential in the woods and in life. I'm your host, Matt Lear. Come on in, kick off your shoes, and take a seat on the mat as we develop a mindset for success, forge self-discipline, practice the art of continuous improvement, and hone our craft. Welcome to the Mobile Hunters Dojo. I'm your host, Matt Lear, and this is a bonus episode this week of the Dojo. We collaborated with the Runnin' and Gunnin' podcast with Justin Synan, and this is part 2 to that podcast. So if you're just tuning in, you're going to have to go over to the Runnin' and Gunnin' podcast, listen to part 1, and then come back here and finish up part 2. If you're coming over from the Runnin' and Gunnin' podcast, welcome to the Dojo. We're glad you are here, and we hope you stay. I also want to say this really quick before we jump into the podcast. You know, doing the podcast it's a lot of work. And with social media and the algorithms, it's really hard to get the message out. So if you like what you've heard here, or if you heard over at the Runnin' and Gunnin' podcast, please take the time to share this podcast or our post as much as possible, because really the only way we can get the word out is through all of you. So sharing is a huge help. And this is something we do because we have a passion for it. We love to share this information. We love to bring you these, amazing whitetail masters, but we really need the help of all of our listeners. Please go and give us a rating and share our post as often as possible. It would mean so much to us and be such a big help. The last thing I want to say is I haven't been able to say this since I put it in the intro, but come on in, kick off your shoes and take a seat on the mat. We're getting ready to dive in. Enjoy the podcast, everybody.
I already know how big he is. I'm not going to let him go, but I wanted my buddy to take him. He's never shot a good deer with his bow, and it was super exciting.
Yeah.
But, just an example of how magical, that spot that you're avoiding, or that spot that you feel like, you got to go look at it. You got to go test it out. Because, the only thing that I saw in there when I walked in was one decent sized rub, and that was it. There wasn't a ton of sign everywhere. There was one good rub. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to sit right here. The wind's perfect. And
yeah, that whole that one good rub. Last year I heard a lot about efficiency, scouting with efficiency, and I just can't do that because I'll walk into an area and I don't see the sign, and everything in me wants to move on because I want to go find another spot. I want to make sure that I'm efficient with my time because, I want to make sure I have the right spot. But more times than not, it's me getting curious and just pushing through, and then all of a sudden, a spot that I was ready to write off unlocks. And a lot of times just these small little things like a rub, or something catches my eye, like a broken branch. And I go in that spot right before I was ready to walk away. And now the spot has went from a nothing spot to the spot. And the only way I can do that is by being curious, is just continue to be curious and creative. And then all of a sudden it opens up. And so that's hard to be efficient with, it contradicts itself.
Yeah. It's just, I hate to say the word situational, but, it's, and I think you hit the nail on the head, with referring to your spidey senses when you get that feeling. And I think the only way to achieve that level is to scout a ton and to understand a little bit better what you're looking at. And I think that's where a lot of newer hunters struggle the most, if I'm being honest with you. I think, myself included, in the beginning, I just wasn't sure what, everybody talks about hot sign.
Mm-hmm.
What is hot sign? How do you explain to somebody that doesn't know what that is, what it looks like, and realistically, I think the only way to really do that is to have boots on the ground and visually show someone. And when a person doesn't have a mentor to do that, it's it can really take a lot of years to understand what you're looking at, and you can walk right by it.
Yeah. The key is you got to have the right mentor that knows that,
Yeah.
There's a lot,
that too.
I was hunting for, I don't know, 15 years. And if I would have became someone's mentor, they would have been in a bad spot because I wasn't thinking the way that I was thinking today,
Yeah.
And so it's really important to get yourself around, again, like you said, the right people. And, the resume really does speak for itself. I mean, it's easy to find the right person because they're going to be able to have stories and things to back up, their skills. And
Well,
go ahead. The walking around the scouting part, like you had mentioned, your days that instead of just sitting in the stand, I'd rather go out and scout. One question I have for you is, in season when you're scouting, are you leaving the bow in the truck or are you taking the bow with you while you scout?
It depends. More times than not, I don't take the bow because it depends on how big the parcel is. If it's a big parcel and I want to walk around for a few hours, I won't take the bow. If it's a small little parcel, I'll take the bow just in case because I can slow down a little bit and I know I'll be able to cover everything. And if I do get in there and, I find what I'm looking for, if it's that kind of a situation and it's like in the afternoon, let's say, I'll take my gear with me. And there's been times where I won't set up at all and I'll just go back to the truck.
Yep.
But if I do find what I'm looking for and I might only have 2 hours of light left, I'll go sit for those 2 hours and see what I see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to look at things, but that really depends on how big your chunk that you're hunting is, whether it's public, I would say like that statement really applies more to public land hunting than private land. But
yeah, it's hard for me to get my head into private land. It's funny that you say that. I'm trying to now because I am always thinking public because that's what I hunt. That's all I've always hunted. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to get my mind into the private conversation because I've got a lot of great guys that I interview who private's a big part of their game. Yeah. And I'm learning off of them right now. I'm learning off of guys who've done that. And so some of my questions, they don't really quite work out all the time for people who are hunting on private. I wish I could get to a point where I leave the gear in the truck. Like that is something I watch of guys that I consider to be elite to go, no, I'm really looking for the information. And some of that I think is also how they prefer to kill. Like I'd rather decide to set up on that spot and then kill that deer than just kind of fumble into it and kill that deer. I think there's more satisfaction around figuring it out and doing it. Mm-hmm. Yet I'm still carrying all my stuff with me, and I'll walk a couple 1,000-acre piece, and I'll carry the gear all day and be beat up by the time I get back to the truck. I feel like I'm getting closer and closer to being able to leave it in the truck and just go.
It's taken me a long time, man. I'll be honest with you. I was always the one that was taking my bow with me. And then I think Cody finally got me to that point where he was like, dude, just leave it. And you're so much more efficient. Rendell Eric helped me with that too. Being able to e-scout and pick a certain area, like that really comes down to just your knowledge level and like, can you dictate where a buck's going to be at? All right. Mm-hmm. If you can look at a topo map and you're like, here's 2 pins that I think I'm going to find a buck, and go straight to that instead of wasting all your time and looking all over and wasting an hour looking in an area where there's just does or there's nothing, versus going straight to where you need to be and straight back. And a lot of times that's really where, like, I want you guys that are listening to focus on, get your education on reading maps, and then do your boots on the ground scouting on those areas that you pick, and just look when you're going in there. I mean, don't just go, run straight to that area, but at the same time, like, that's what you need to do. If you need to be able to go through a list of 10 places and cross off, okay, this is dynamite and this is not good. And that's really going to further educate you and give you a lot more success. And if you're running cameras, that's my main, repertoire for scouting public now. It's like, what's my highest odds spot to catch a buck, or what's, where's a good place I can manipulate a deer to move and hit a scrape. That's my main objective nowadays, is the highest odds spots on little parcels or bigger parcels where can I put a camera at where I can catch the most deer movement and learn? And I might not even check that camera till the end of the season. And then like, okay, well, I learned that, this area was super active in late October, or this area was just dynamite, early season and not so much late season.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. I mean, right behind me, the book that I have sitting on the shelf, mapping trophy bucks, and what's so cool about that book now is you can pull that book out and study it like you're in class and pull up your Onyx or whatever you're using, put on the topo of a piece of public or a piece of private, whatever you're hunting, and look at the book and try to find that on the screen. You can make it really interactive and teaching yourself how to use a topo. And I do the same thing. Like, I guess it's always both and there's never like a definitive answer. I talk about being curious and not efficient, yet I'm definitely looking for specific things and I go out. Topo dictates where I move, where I'm going to go look. Like that's like the way that I maneuver through the woods now. That before I even heard it way back in the 90s when I was hunting, and I just ignored it. I don't know why. I was just stubborn, young, whatever.
Yeah,
I just was like, I don't want to learn how to do topo, so I'm going to go do it a different way. And it's like, unfortunately, there's certain rules where there's a lot of creativity. We get to think outside the box in a lot of ways, and we should. There are certain like golden rules that are going to really help you out, and understanding how deer move through terrain is like the number one thing, I think. It's
right.
so important.
I know my dad, he killed a couple good deer. He wasn't like a big buck slayer or anything like that. But the number one thing that he taught me, I think that really helped set me apart at a younger age was just woodsmanship versus I have such a hard time, and I might rub some people the wrong way saying this, but I'm just going to say it. I think, in my opinion, there's two different kind of hunters. There's, the guys that are putting corn out or putting bait out, and there's the guys that are hunting deer on their natural movements. And depending on who you're listening to, you're not going to be able to hunt the same or learn the same about deer unless you're hunting them on their natural movements. That's what we're all talking about right now. And you might see guys that are killing 200s and 180s every year, but they're doing it over corn. And you can't take those guys and put them in the Midwest on a chunk of public and expect them to kill something. Yeah. I mean, they may be able to, don't get me wrong, but like, I would say if you really look at the majority of that, like you're not going to learn the same from that person that you're going to learn from somebody like yourself that is constantly scouting and learning how a deer moves from this ridge to that ridge,
Yeah.
And it's something that doesn't get talked a lot about because I think it is, it's like, I want you to hunt the way you want to hunt. And if that's how you do it, then, and you enjoy it, then by all means. But I understand some guys can't hunt the way that we do because they don't have the time to dedicate to doing that. And like they only have a weekend and they have to have, if they've only got their little chunk of private land, like I used to use corn. I'm not going to act like I didn't used to use it. It's a situational tactic. Like if you have 2 acres to hunt on, what else are you supposed to do? And if it's legal, then there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm strictly talking an educational thing here.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, it's two different things. There's hunting to, sit there and enjoy sitting in a blind and shooting an animal and then eating that animal. That's all good. That's all good. What I look at, like what we do, it's more about personal development. Yeah. It's all of those things, but it's more about developing ourselves and pressing ourselves and trying to discover what we can learn, how much we can learn, and how far we can go. And those are two different things. Meaning, honestly, if you sent me a pen right now and said, "Hey, Matt, I know there's a 140 here, and I want to kill a 140," like that's my goal, right?
Yeah,
I wouldn't go sit in that pen,
right?
Because you're the one that did the work. You're the one that found it. I can't do that. Like, I would rather not shoot a 140 that year or not shoot a deer than go sit in a spot that I didn't learn and I didn't, or at least wasn't a part of, And so those are two different mindsets, and they're two different goals or two different reasons. And I don't think the reason for the guy who can't get out and is working a lot, but yet still likes to eat venison and, wants to That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not talking about the same thing. It's two different games. And I think sometimes that's the part that gets confusing for people is like, well, he's killing, 150s consistently. Yeah, but we're not talking about the same thing. And this is not even a public-private this is not what I'm talking about. Like that conversation's crazy too. Private, it's just how you go about it. It doesn't matter if you're on private. It doesn't matter if you're on public. It's what I've been hashtagging on my posts is calling a mobile mentality. So like a mobile mentality isn't just about being mobile. It's just how we think, how mobile hunters think and why we do things. I think has more to do about development than it does about just killing and eating of venison. Those are part of it, but it's more than that.
Yeah. 100%, man. I love that. It really is. And it's, what do you want out of hunting? Like that's really what it boils down to. What do you enjoy doing? And for me, I think it's fun, being able to take does and put them right where you want to. And I'll tell you what, it made me a very efficient bow hunter.
Yeah.
I got really good at killing deer, but at the end of the day, I think, it's part of why I moved to Kentucky. Like, I'm just going to say it. I started off mobile hunting. That's how I started. Like, I hunted with a climber. I'd walk in the woods. I'd read sign and I would hunt, and I'd see deer and I'd adjust and I'd kill. And I loved that. And then it got to a point where I lived at, we didn't really have many high caliber deer. So I started hunting suburban deer when I started getting permission on small parcels. And the thrill to me was to be able to chase big bucks. Well, you can do that in certain places if you got enough property. But for me, it was like the population density was so thick. And it was literally like, okay, I've got 3 acres here, 2 acres here, all these different spots. And it just, after killing a few bucks like that, it just wasn't the same. I didn't enjoy it near as much. And I kind of got tired of the pissing match of, oh, well, this guy's hunting this deer. Oh, it's like an argument. It's like, you know what? I'm going to move somewhere where I can enjoy hunting the way that I want to do it, and get back to like the roots of how I liked hunting. And man, it's the past 5 years have just changed everything for me. I feel like it's gotten me back, and I've elevated my skills even more than what they were before. And I love it. And it's like, it's such a rewarding experience, to be able to just chase these bucks down. And I feel bad for the guys that aren't able to go experience that because it brings a whole new level of, excitement to hunting for me.
Yeah. It's adventure. I mean, that's what it does for me is it just gives me this adventure to live, that a life that's full of purpose. And it's funny. I always say, like, imagine if we got really passionate about business and we applied everything that we did, we'd be millionaires. It'd be great.
I honestly have thought the same thing so many times, and I'm like, what am I doing with my life right now? Let's shift gears into that, because we've been rambling on this and we've had a good conversation, but we need to be real for a second too. Like, we're talking about all this out of state hunting and how we're doing it, but how do we like financially are able to do this to the degree that we want to do it? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been tough. It's so funny because, there were points in my life where we all go through different stages in life. I think, when you don't have children, you've got, it seems like endless amount of money. You can go do whatever you want and go all over the place. And then maybe you get married and you have children and you buy a bigger house, and then more debt comes, and it just keeps changing. And now I have teenagers. And for some reason, right before we got on, I was looking at my budget, just going through, getting ready for because I have big goals this fall. Yeah. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know how I'm gonna make this happen. All of a sudden, teenagers got really expensive. And it's sacrifice, right? You're looking at areas of, I'm like, okay, we're not going to do our summer. I can't do my summer vacation thing that I didn't normally want to do. And like, and I have to sit down, and now I got to have that conversation with my wife, and we talk through those things. And luckily I've got someone who supports the passion, and is like, you know what, this year, let's pull back on that. So you can go do this thing. My plan is to do to go really hard out of state, harder than I've ever gone before. And I want to hunt 4 different states. And
awesome.
yeah, it's a lot of tags. It's a lot of travel. And it's funny because I usually hunt 2 to 3 states, but the 4th one does take it to another level. And she's like, go for it. Let's do it. And so that helps, but it does take a sacrifice. I mean, we're changing things on how we normally live right now just so we can make it. It's not easy. Like the money just isn't there this year, you know? And in the years past it was there and now it's not.
I love what you said about, your wife and being supportive, man, because I don't think that any of us that are diehard hunters could do what we do without having,
No.
I would say most of us have spouses and stuff, for the most part. And there's no way we could do what we do without a cool wife, that's understanding.
Yeah.
And it does, man. I mean, it really is a ton of sacrifice. I mean, on both ends too, like financially, what can we do? I mean, unless you're blessed and you make a ton of money. I mean, I'm a blue collar guy. I do handyman work and heating and air work. And it's a hard balancing act to be able to do what we do and still be a good dad and, have a good relationship with your wife. It's so many things. And man, like planning is everything. Cause if you don't have goals, like, I think you saw my recent little post that I did, you commented and you have to know what you're doing. A ship with no destination will never leave a port,
Yeah.
You gotta know what you want. You gotta know how to get there and be realistic in what you're doing. And sacrifice is everything. I mean, what are you willing to lose today to gain tomorrow? Whether it be not eating out fast food or letting go of something that you've owned. Like, for me, I have a 4-wheeler that I haven't ridden in a year or two. I think I'm going to sell it because it's just collecting dust. And I could use it here or there, but like, do I need it? No. I mean, what needs and wants? I think that's a great, thing to
I just had my truck breakdown in Illinois. I had a 2011 Silverado, had 245,000 miles on it. Ran like a top, I thought. Like, it was great. And it's so funny. I just had this feeling. I told my wife, I said, I think I'm going to kill the truck on this trip. Like, something's going to happen. Like, it's a ticking time bomb at that point. It's a half ton. This isn't like a heavy duty. And sure enough, halfway to the spot in Illinois, my truck starts jerking. And I'm like, man, what's going on? I pull over. I can't see anything wrong. I call her. She's a super optimistic person. She's like, I've had that happen before. Just keep going. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I should come home because if I get stuck where I'm going, like, this is going to be bad news. And keep going. So I got there, and sure enough, as I pulled into the campsite, I lost all my gears. And I'm sitting there like, oh. So long story short, I do get it home. I nursed it all the way home. It's pretty funny, but I'll tell it some other time. But now I've got to buy a new truck. That truck was paid off. I had no payment. And I'm looking at it, and I had this idea of a truck that I wanted. And man, it's crazy how expensive trucks are right now, Oh,
no, man.
I'm looking at a $30,000 payment, and I'm looking at my budget and looking at the goals that I want to make. And I'm like, I'm going to have to get a high mileage, cheaper truck if I want to keep going on the hunts that I want. And this is where it gets tough because you're like, I got to have a dependable truck to go do what I want to do. But I'm also going, maybe I don't get a truck. Maybe needs and wants. Like, maybe I end up just getting like, these little, it hurts me to even say it. Like these little like hybrid SUV type things that have good gas mileage and I just make it work. And I'm leaning really towards that right now because in order to accomplish what I want to accomplish, something's got to sacrifice. Something's got to go.
Absolutely.
The other part too, when you talk about setting those goals, man, it's if you just set your goals on just you in the hunting stuff, it's going to fall apart. Like, you really have to look at your whole life in order to do this. And that's where I do see some guys who have potential to be elite lose it, is that they only think about the hunt and they neglect. And I did this 15 years ago. I neglected my family. I was gone all the time. I was hunting all the time. And my wife came to me with papers in hand and said, you need to choose. It's either us or hunting. And I didn't know how to control this thing and balance it out. And I had to make a decision in that moment. And for me, I had to walk away from hunting for a little while to get an understanding of that. But now it's like, man, you have to invest into your family, your wife. These things have to be tight in order for you to go out and actually perform at the level that you want to perform. And not just that, but it's all parts of your life. When you're setting your hunting goals, you should be setting your family goals, your spiritual goals, your financial goals. They're all part of that plan.
I could not agree more, brother. Honestly, no, I mean, you hit me there. It's last year was really like a push for me to try and go hunt more out of state. My wife's used to me staying at home and just hunting around here. It's like, with having 2 young kids, my kids are, 9 or last year, 8 and 4. So it's kind of tough, Yeah. And you got to make sure your wife's happy. Happy wife, happy life is a very true testament, especially when you're hunting as much as we do. And that's one thing, I'm glad you said that, because I've seen the same thing, and I've kind of asked myself, like, how some of these guys are able to do what they do. And like, I wonder how things are for them at home, like what are they doing to butter their wives up and be able to do all this stuff, And I've seen some of my other buddies that are single lose girlfriends over it. I mean, you got to be upfront, guys. Like, those of you single guys out there listening to this, like, make sure that's a number one when you meet a young lady, that, she's okay with what you're doing, because just get rid of her if it's not going to work out. Because to me, that was, no, I'm just being honest. I mean, it's the truth. You save yourself the time, because you got to make sure, put her through the test. I mean, I was always like that when I was dating. It was like, hey, here's what I love to do. You got to be all right with it. I mean, because I'm not changing it.
Yeah.
If you're
it's
in it
funny
for the
though.
long
Like
haul,
I said that to my wife too. I said, hey, this is who I am. But to do it at the level that we do it, and I'm just talking about the commitment level. It's hard for people to understand what that actually looks like until they're in it. And that's when they actually make their decision. Because I told her, this is what it's like. I'm going to be gone during this time. We didn't have kids. All of those things weren't involved. And then all of a sudden we had little kids. And she's like, look, I know what I said earlier, but now we've introduced new things into the equation. And that has changed my answer,
And family's number one for me. I'm sure it is for you too,
Yep. It just has to be, and if you're young, go out there and do as much as you can without a girlfriend. Like, get it all in,
I know. Sometimes it's hard not to like envy a little bit, like, of the single guys that are able to get out there. You're like, oh, yep, not today. What do you got going on? Oh, why aren't you in the woods? Soccer game, cheerleading, and for me, it's like, I think that's really what, to come full circle with this thing is like why it's so important to scout and have, I especially, that's one of the biggest things I've learned from Andy May is like being so meticulous and doing that extra scouting and like having that confidence that on this day, on the right weather, like I'm going to kill that deer. And I'm still working on it. I'm not near as good as he is at it, but I really do I'm trying to get to that level where it's like you hunt a little bit less and you scout a little bit more, because I think it's easier for me to jet out, for an hour or two and go scout something versus being gone for 6 hours, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
At least when you're home, at least, instead of doing the out of state stuff. But
that's one thing I wish I would have done, was committed more to in my home state. I wish I would have done that. Like, I started hunting out of state in 2008, and primarily that's what I've been doing since. I mean, I'll dabble around Michigan, even without the caliber of buck that I wanted to go after. I wish I would have just done that, like committed to here, and because you could do it more. You could do the hour. When I go, I got to go for 3 days. Like, I just got back from Illinois. I was gone for 4 days.
Right.
Because I got to be efficient. Like, I got to get everything done. I got to make sure I'm not going back and forth all the time. So that is a plus for hunting local. Even if your bucks are smaller, like, there's a benefit to being close to home and getting at it there, No,
you're absolutely right, man. I think that was part of my thought process when we moved out here, was that, well, and I'll be very honest, I didn't really travel to hunt until I moved out here. I figured with the location that we were at, it was going to be perfect for me, jetting to Illinois or jetting to Ohio, whatever. We're in a good central location. But, I mean, it's kind of a downside having a $1. And I know, from when we did the podcast together, it's like, you really wanted to kill bigger deer. And like, hey, I mean, if you want to kill big deer, you got to hunt where they live at. And it's tough to do in Michigan, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, it is. Yeah. The way I look at it is the amount of time I put in out of state, I can get shots at, 3-4 big deer throughout the season. It would take that amount of time just to get shot at one deer here in Michigan, which is not, I mean, I've got close friends. That's what they do. And I think I took the easy way out, but I love the adventure though, too. I just love going to towns I don't know anybody. And like, I got this weird thing where I go out to Applebee's and sit down with old people at the bar and talk to them all night. And like, it's fun awesome. To me. Like, I really enjoy that adventure.
I agree. Well, what was it this year in Illinois? We were both out there scouting at the same time and we were pretty close to each other. Yeah. And I almost felt weird asking you, like, I didn't want to know where you were hunting, but I'm like, hey man, if you want to come hang out or something, we found this hole in the wall bar. And, I mean, like, dude, it was very strange. We got in there and they're like, well, you guys aren't from around here, are you? And we're like, nope. What are you doing out here? We're like, looking for big deer. Can you help us?
Yeah.
So, well, there is big deer around here, but there's also a lot of trouble. So be alert. And I'm like, really? Like, I feel like we're in Podunk Town, USA, No, apparently you got to be a little bit alert where you're going too.
Yeah, that's weird. I've had some weird things like that happen where I drive into a town and it looks one way. And quickly I realized, like, oh, this is a different type of town that I didn't expect. They're like, I got to be careful.
Right. Hey, make sure you don't go to this hotel or that hotel. Like, all right. Well, what's going on here? Oh, well, we didn't tell you. Yeah. Okay. Oh, well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Yeah. Without name dropping anything. But
no, it's hard. I wanted to when I was talking about the town that I was thinking of, but I was like, I can't.
We'll give way too much away. When we get done. Yeah. Well, Matt, it's been a blast, man. I really enjoyed this. I feel like an hour zipped by like nothing.
I know. It goes quick.
It does. Is there anything else you want to touch on or wrap up?
No, it's good, man. I just, I've really enjoyed your podcast. You've been a big like motivation for me. And like, I really feel like what you're trying to accomplish with your podcast is the same as mine. And that's just to help people, reach their full potential. And
likewise, brother. And thank you so much for that. I do appreciate it.
Yeah. So I appreciate you kind of laying the groundwork.
No, man, I'm learning from you too, dude. I am. It's like, iron sharpens iron. So I think I really enjoyed doing this little collab together and hopefully we can help get I feel like most of my listeners probably listen to your podcast and likewise. So it's been a blast, man. And hopefully we can get together sometime, in the near future. I'd like to maybe try and plan something if we can.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to hunt your deer, but if it works out and we can plan around the same time frame, man, we'll have to get together and cook some deer meat together or something.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, man. I'm always down for some company and traveling. So yeah, anytime.
Absolutely. Well, cool, man. Well, appreciate y'all tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
Well, that is a wrap for us here at the Dojo. We'll be back next Thursday with another Whitetail Master. You can also listen to us every Tuesday for our 10-minute Tuesday episode where I break down a tactic, talk about mindset and personal development, or anything else that might jump in my head in 10 minutes or less. If you like what we are doing here at the Dojo, please give us a review. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Mobile Hunters Dojo.